So this series of videos is about writing, the nature of writing. And at first glance, or on first hearing I should say, writing seems to be simply a process of transcribing speech. We've got a word, cat, and we've got sounds, phonics, k, at, t, and therefore you write it down and it's a transcription of speech. Now in fact, writing is deceptively complex and it's deceptively different from speech. And what I'm really going to be talking about in this series of videos is just the ways in which it's different.
I now turn to making meaning by writing. Here also there are many theories and debates, but basically we can say writing is a transcription of language. That is a rendering of thinking into symbolic systems and onto a surface. Traditional grammar represents writing in the following basic ways. Firstly, it deals with morphemes. These are the smallest grammatical units of a language, like the prefix, the stem, the suffix, the number, the tense, mood, voice. It also likes to name parts of speech as nouns, pronouns, adjectives, verbs, adverbs, prepositions, conjunctions, and of course syntax, how these come together in phrases, clauses, sentences, and agreement. These elements of writing adjust meaning by the way that they are chosen and the way that they are combined. It sounds simple, but it's not. There are lots of complications, rules, and exceptions involved that we will examine together in this unit.
Here are a set of contrasts now between speaking and writing. So speaking is you and I are together, I'm here, you're there, and we're here simultaneously in the same space. Writing is something about communicating at a distance. So I write something down. It's not in the same time that it gets read. And in fact, when it's read might be an arbitrarily different time. It doesn't have to be simultaneous, and there's nothing particular about when it might be. And it's at a distance often. You might be in the same space, but whether you're in the same space or not is actually immaterial. And writing is designed to be writing at a distance. The person communicating is no longer there. So this might seem to be trivial and obvious, but actually has a whole lot of interesting and important implications. Firstly, speaking is very much a creature of time. We're in the same time together. Whereas writing is very much a creature of space. And the structure of speaking and the structure of writing are actually quite different. So I'm now doing a funny thing, which is really, it's speaking, but it's kind of a little bit like writing, because I've done so much writing in my life that I often speak like somebody who's writing. But if I was just having a conversation with you now, or perhaps telling you a story or telling you what I did yesterday, it would be simply a series of clauses, and each clause is pretty uniform. They're probably about the same size, and it's a string of clauses, one clause after another. And there are none of the artifacts that appear in writing, like a sentence. A sentence doesn't appear in speaking, or beyond that, paragraphs or sections. So what we have in clauses is a relatively flat, continuous structure of units which are very similar, following each other one after the other in time. Whereas what we have is in writing, we have this hierarchical structure of phrases, clauses, sentences, paragraphs, sections, which actually are laid out in space. So there's another set of important differences. But the other thing about speaking is that it's repetitive and redundant. So if you were to record a conversation between two people, they might say the same phrase a couple of different ways. They might repeat themselves. It's repetitive, it's redundant, it's circuitous, it's roundabout, and I think of something else that I referred to a minute ago and I elaborate on that, and then I jump forward. But what happens is that my thinking happens sequentially. Once something's been said, it's been said forever, and if I need to elaborate on it, I need to say it again. Whereas what we do with writing is actually very concise. It's about, you don't want to use the same word twice in consecutive sentences because it doesn't sound good. If it's said once, it doesn't need to be said again. So it's actually highly structured and dense in a way that speaking is kind of, if you like, rambling and repetitive and redundant. Also, the strategies for dealing with errors are very, very different. So if I'm talking to you now and I stumble over a word, I might say something which is a bit ungrammatical, I might correct myself because it doesn't sound right, I might say something which I wasn't very clear about and I really want you to understand clearly. So I sort of rephrase it, I repeat it, I say it another way, I say it a different way. I'm not sure that you understood it, so I say it again. And so what we're all the time doing in speaking is we're doing corrections. We're hearing ourselves speak. We're seeing the response of the other person and wondering whether they understood it. And so we do a lot of error correction, and all the errors corrected are audible. If you like, they're very, very tangible, visible, knowable, seeable, because they're, it's while we're speaking. Whereas what we do in writing is we actually make the errors invisible. We run a spell checker afterwards to fix the spelling. We notice a word that's been repeated. We go back and proof what we've done. And we've always done that with writing, by the way. And the way we did it with handwriting was sometimes we wrote a first draft, then we wrote a neater draft after that, or we did crossings out or whatever. But in a way with digital text, the corrections become even less visible. So there might be suggestive text where, you've spelt something some way and the suggestive text tells you how to spell the correct way or a different way. But also what we do with a keyboard is a lot of repetitive stuff where we're all the time looking back over what we've done, going back over it, this kind of a cycle of moving a bit forward, looking back a sentence, moving a bit forward, looking back a sentence. And we actually do a lot of correction, particularly in these digital spaces, which for the purpose of making our corrections invisible, not to be seen. So the correction strategies are very, very different. The actual processes of fabrication are very, very different. But the next thing about this contrast between speaking and writing is speaking is relentlessly linear. Remember, it happens in time. I can't go back and correct something I said 3 or 4 sentences ago. The only way I can deal with that is to restate it or reframe it or make a correction or something now. It's linear because it's absolutely wedded to time. Something that was said 5 seconds ago is gone forever because those seconds can't be recreated, and I have to repeat those seconds in the future if I want to recreate them. Whereas the process of writing is multilinear. So in other words, I'm looking back at the text up there, I'm looking at the structure there, I'm thinking where I might go here. So my thinking processes around the text are not just the linearity of time, but they are the multilinearity of space because I'm framing this thing on a screen or on a page, and so on. And one final thing about the differences between speaking and writing is there in our theory of multimodality, which we've been outlining through these videos and this course and this book, one of the interesting things is what each mode is aligned to. And speaking is very much aligned with gesture. Here I am doing all this kind of stuff. If you like, I'm the conductor of my own speech. It's like an orchestra where I'm doing this as I speak. And goodness knows, I tell you what, I don't know what this and this and this means. I'm doing all these things and they do mean something and I'm barely conscious of it. So in other words, speaking and gesture are really closely aligned. Whereas in a way, writing is very closely aligned with image. The words are images themselves, but we also often put images in text in a multimodal world. So I can't put images in my speaking, or well, in fact I can because it's called a video, but in fact, when I'm speaking in normal speech, I can't put images in there. And likewise, when I'm building a written text, gesture has gone, right? I've got images in there and I'm communicating, unless it's a video, gesture's gone. So what's interesting is that the kinds of other modes that speaking and writing are naturally aligned with are quite different. As I say, to repeat, speaking is aligned with gesture, writing is aligned with image. Gesture happens in time, image happens in space. So these are actually remarkably important differences. So here we are in literacy in schools, and we think, it's about phonics. It's about, the transliteration of speech, and if we can conquer phonics, we're on the way to literacy because you're just writing down speech. It's actually a lot more than that. It's actually profoundly different in ways which are not always that obvious. And what it involves a different kind of mental effort. My thinking processes in speaking are actually very, very different from my thinking and design process, if you like, in the process of writing. And so what that means, by the way, is that when children get to school, learning to write is not just simply about learning the sounds of speech, right? It's actually a whole new way of thinking, a whole new way of representing the world, and a whole new way of communicating in the world.